One reason that subscription e-commerce has recently become so successful is that subscription companies have customer retention built into their business model. After all, your business relies on subscribers to continue. But not all subscription businesses are aware of this, and often they focus on getting new sales and new customers as opposed to retaining the customers they already have. But since 80% of your future sales come from only 20% of your existing customers, which is known as the 80/20 rule, it's vital that you focus on your retention rate. And that's why Syft has a retention section, which takes a look at how well you're doing at retaining your customers, and it helps you identify things that are maybe going wrong in regards to churn or contractions. We also then take a deeper look at churn, and we do a bit of forecasting into the future churn. And so we're going to take a look at each of these three tabs and see how they can help your subscription business. Within the retention tab, we can look at our retention rate, which is the retention rate on a total revenue basis for various different periods. So we can choose how many periods we want to look at over here. And we can choose if we want to see the monthly recurring revenue or the annual recurring revenue. And you can just toggle between the two over here. We then get a graphical view with key metrics. If you hover over any of the graphs, you'll note that the right-hand side changes to that period. So currently it's showing me the details for the month that I've selected, Jan 2023. I can go and change this like I can with any other section of Syft. But if I go and hover over, say, for example, March, you'll note that on the right-hand side, it now shows me the expansion, contractions, churn, and retention rate for that month. So you can go and hover over any of these columns and see the updated figures. And in this way, you can take a detailed look at months when things went well and not so well. So for example, in this month, we can see that the churn has increased dramatically. We can see that our churn is $2,473 and our expansions are only 1,247. And so as we can see, our retention rate has dropped below 100. This differs to this month, for example, where our retention rate was 101% because we had no contractions or churn, but we had some expansions. And so all of these things contribute to this retention rate. And this retention rate is an indication of how well you're retaining your clients and protecting your current client base. So within this retention section, we can assess how successful we've been at keeping our customers happy. Each month, we can see how many of the past month's customers we were able to retain. Of course, we would like to retain 100% like we did in this month over here, but that's not always possible. Where we've dropped, we might want to investigate what happened in that month. Were there customer complaints, a product defect, or less support provided? So we could go and do some of that analysis on this month and try and understand what caused that churn. What caused those transactions, and why couldn't we get as much expansion? This graph is therefore a key starting point to determine what is going well or poorly in your company and how you can either replicate successes and avoid future issues. The next tab we have is churn. And if you click on churn, it will take you to a graph which will show you your subscription churn for a required period. You can change the period at the top in the universal date selector. So we could change it to quarterly instead and change the time period. And we can also go change the number of periods we look at over here. Again, we can look at churn in terms of either revenue or customers. So we're currently looking at it revenue for MRR or monthly recurring revenue. And over here, we'll be able to see what the churn was and the churn rate percentage for the previous month. So the month that we've selected over here. Again, if we hover over a certain month, you'll note that it will change. So now it's showing us the churn and churn rate for the month of July. And so we can go and investigate when our churn was higher or lower. And we could then go and consider what happened in this month where we had a churn rate of 4.5% as compared to this month when we had a 0.2% churn rate. And we can try and identify the causes of this and go and change it going forward. As I mentioned, we can look at it in terms of revenue or the number of customers. So revenue will consider more expensive products or plans. Whereas we look at customers, it will just tell us how many customers we've lost. So it's really useful to look at both of these because over here we now have a churn rate of 3.7 as compared to say 0.3% in terms of customers. You can see here we had 0 churn rates in June, July, and August, and that's definitely what you're working towards. So you want to try and remove these spikes to make sure that you're retaining your customers that you've worked so hard to obtain. The last tab we have here is upcoming churn, and this shows us upcoming canceled subscriptions by revenue and customers on a total basis. So sometimes someone may have already churned, but if they have an annual subscription, that might not yet be reflected because you already have revenue for the next month. Or if they're cancelled in the current month, but the churn will only reflect next month, that might not reflect in this churn graph. So upcoming churn takes into account those items that haven't really churned yet because you still have income from them in the current month. But because they've actually cancelled, we know that in the future, you're not going to generate that revenue. And so this is what this graph is showing us. It's showing us the future churn that is going to come about as a result of current cancellations. For example, there might be someone who's canceled their annual subscription and they've paid all the way up till October, but in November, that churn will suddenly reflect. And so currently, it might not seem that our churn rate is so high because we've got their money for the next few months, but going forward, that churn will impact us. So it gives you a better picture of your future churn and how many customers and how much revenue you can expect to lose based on the current cancellations. And so this is a really useful graph to help you plan for the future. In closing on this retention section, remember that getting new customers is tough work. And so it's important to keep the ones that you've worked so hard to get. And that's what this retention section is there to help you do.